Gentlemen, we are moving on now to Eastern Africa. We will be finishing up with Southern Africa next week, and so today let's start by looking at the countries of Eastern Africa. The the countries are Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi. And then over on the Horn of Africa, which is this section right here, and we'll talk more about that when we get there, is Sudan, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti, and Somalia. Yes, your teacher just said Djibouti. First of all, let's talk about Kenya. Kenya's Indian Ocean coastline has stretches of white beaches lined with palm trees. When you go off of the shore, there's a coral reef. You may have heard of the Great Barrier Reef. There's another coral reef over there that forms an island, and it helps the beaches be more beautiful, and it helps these colorful fish swim around. And of course, tourists want to be around there whenever they have such beauty. West of Kenya's coastline, the land rises to the central part of the country. Much of this upland plain is dry, but there is enough rain that falls on the hilly areas to support farming. Lions, elephants, rhinoceroses, and other wildlife also roam on this plain. Millions of acres have been designated there in Africa as nature preserves, which is a nature preserve is land that is set aside by a government to help protect plants and wildlife. Uh, Still in recent years, though, poaching has been a problem there. And poaching is when you hunt something illegally that is not supposed to be hunted. And that has really been a problem there. As for the climate of Kenya, it is warm year round. Because of its location close to the equator, it tends to be this way. But I know when you're close to the equator, we often think it's going to be warm, but you also have to remember that altitude or how high something is affects how warm it is. And so the highland regions tend to be cooler than the lowlands. And so the highlands as well as the coastal regions receive a lot more rain than the central plains. And so when you want to see good farmland, you're going to see that it is better to farm in the highlands. The capital is Nairobi, and it has become the center of business and commerce for all of East Africa. Um, Even foreign countries come and set up their headquarters in Nairobi, and because it offers good transportation as well as good communication systems. When we talk about good communication systems, we're talking about such things as the internet, good telephone, the ability to be able to communicate with others, and mainly electronically in this day and age. A lot of Kenyans are very, very poor. There are nomadic or moving herders as well as subsistence farmers, and that is really the main economic activity in most of Kenya. Most of the crops are uh, tend to be corn, potatoes, sweet potatoes, and bananas. Even some larger farms raise coffee and tea. In Kenya, they believe in the belief of Harambe. No, not the gorilla that died not too long ago, but Harambe means pulling together. And even though they come from a ton of different ethnic backgrounds, they work together to try to strengthen their country. The Kikuyu is the main ethnic group in Kenya. There's about 40 other ethnic groups, but uh, this one makes up about a fourth of the population. If you visited Kenya, you would discover that most Kenyans live in rural areas. They about a fourth of the people live in rural areas, and but Nairobi is the largest city. It's got about 1 million people in it, and it is also a port area, which means that it's a place where they ship stuff out and receive imports and exports, and so it does a lot for their ocean going trade. Let's move on to Tanzania. Tanzania. This country has a lot of landforms and climates similar to the those in Kenya. The Indian Ocean coastline, it's got white beaches and palm trees, uh, bordered by a thin band of humid lowlands, and so you continue to go inland, and it starts sloping upward, and that's when we start seeing the Serengeti Plain. It's got huge grasslands. It's got patches of trees and shrubs. It's very beautiful. But then you keep going north near the Kenyan border, and there is, yes, in Africa, there is a there is a mountain called Mount Kilimanjaro, and it often has snow on the top of it. It is Africa's highest peak. The Great Rift Valley cuts two gashes through Tanzania, one in the center of the country and the other one is along the western border. Um, excuse me. Lake Victoria is in the northwest corner of Tanzania. It is Africa's largest lake, and it is one of the sources of the Nile River. It is so large that you can even see it on most globes. I know, lakes that we see here in Arkansas, you're not going to see on the world globe, but Lake Victoria is a very, very large lake. Just east of the mainland is three islands: Pemba, Zanzibar, and Mafia Islands. They are all formed from coral as well. Tanzanians work in farming or herding. Most of them grow food on subsistence farms. Some farmers grow coffee, cotton, tea, cashews, and tobacco for export. Tourism is really a fast growing industry there and continues to grow because of the Serengeti National Park. It covers 5,600 square miles. It's got lions and wild dogs, and they hunt thousands of zebras, wildebeests, and antelopes. So you can see why that tourists would be eager to go there and see these kinds of animals. Uh, they have about 120 ethnic groups. There are about 60 million people. I'm sorry, about 6 million people, include more than 120 ethnic groups, and most of them have their own language. But if you need to speak commonly among others, they also speak Swahili. The two main religions there are Christianity and Islam. There are two capitals in Tanzania. One of them, the first one was Dar es Salaam, and that was put there early on. And then later on in time, Dodoma became one of the capitals to help move some of the population inland into the center of the country. That has somewhat worked. All right, let's move on to Uganda. This will be our last country for the day, and then on Wednesday we will finish up the countries of East Africa. Uganda is a fertile green land of mountains, lakes, and wild animals. It consists mainly of a central plateau. Uh, there's also south of that plateau is Lake Victoria. We talked about that one in Kenya. It's part of Tanzania as well, part of their landscape. The Nile River flows from Lake Victoria through the central plateau to the lakes of the west. And although Uganda lies on the equator as well, it has their temperatures are mild because there again, it's a high country. It's a high elevation that causes that to be more of a mild temperature. A lot of rich soil, a lot of rain, makes good land for farming. So more than 80% of Uganda's people are employed in agriculture. Most farmers work on subsistence farm. Let me take just a minute to remind you guys of what subsistence farming is. We've talked about it in several other areas throughout the year, but subsistence farming is not what we would see as commercial farmers on their big tractors making enough for themselves and everyone else. That'd be commercial farming. Subsistence farming is when the person growing the crops makes enough for their family to live on. they are able to live on what they are able to provide through growing either with meat and or vegetables. And so that's when we talk about that, that's what subsistence farming is. They grow plantains, which is kind of a banana. They also grow potatoes, corn, and grains. There are some plantations that grow coffee, which wouldn't be a subsistence farmer here because it's a plantation, and they grow coffee and tea for export. And it is so that makes it Uganda's most important cash crop. The capital is Kampala, and Kampala is a port city. And what we mean by port city is talking about the fact that you can get to Lake Victoria very easily, which helps with shipping, and that is what makes it a very important city. About 85% of Ugandans are Christians. The remaining 15% or so, or a little less, are either belong to Islam or they are some traditional African religion. They belong there in Uganda to about 40 different ethnic groups. They have a very rich cultural heritage. They sing folk tales and songs and poems, and they have a very, very basic diet. Their meals often include beans, beef, goat, mutton, cornmeal, and a variety of tropical fruits. All right, so next week we will be joining together to look at both um, Rwanda and Burundi, and we'll even start looking at the Horn of Africa at that point. Hope you guys all have a great day.